So if you're purchasing a property outside of an auction, if you sign a contract, it will come with a cooling off period. Particularly for off the plan developments, there's a limited amount of due diligence that you can actually do anyway. Typically if the transaction doesn't complete and you've already paid stamp duty, you get that back.
Right.
Yeah, so that would be refundable.
And
to
New South
buy.
Wales government is pretty good with that. Hello everyone, welcome back to the 6th episode of Property Dollar. I'm so amazed and I'm so happy that I've got such a great audience supporting us, and I think that we can grow further. It amazes me that 50% of our audience who visits and see our podcast are not subscriber. So I would request you, if you want more and more content around property, more and more content around how to buy your first property, investment property, etc., please hit that subscribe button. It will help us grow. And if we have more subscriber, the quality of guest improves. With that, as you know that we are moving towards our journey of buying a property. We started with how you educate yourself on buying your property, which is through a buyer's agent who will help you navigate the intricacies of what is the right property. Then we moved into the more of the finance, which is speaking with a mortgage broker, answering the question around how much you can borrow, what's the good interest rate, etc. We then moved into buying the actual property and dealing with real estate agent, and we spoke with real estate agents as well. Recently, we spoke with Vishal, who's the CEO of Property Dollar, and we covered a little bit insights about Melbourne market, which is booming, and it's very interesting to see that. And today we hit the nail in the coffin, and today we have, I would say, something very complicated, but something very critical to buyer's journey, which is conveyancing. So basically, someone who looks at your contract and works on your behalf to negotiate terms with the vendor solicitor to make sure that all the terms, or most of them, are in your favor. So today I have David, and a bit about David is that David founded a company called Your Move Conveyancing. David started his career in 2006, and in 2010, David became a licensee in charge of the branch office. In 2014, David founded Your Move Conveyancing, pretty well 10 years to the date, with the desire to use his conveyancing skills and passion for providing an exceptional customer service experience. Starting as one-man band, working out of his cousin's plumbing garage, he quickly built a team of passionate, like-minded conveyancers around him. Your Move Conveyancing now employs 24 staff across Chatswood and Newcastle offices, looking after 2,000 people achieve their property dreams every year. David, welcome to Property Dollar.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
David, this is something that used to scare me a lot, right? When I was buying my very first property, and lawyers, conveyancers, solicitors, oh, I gotta speak to all of them. Oh my God, do I need to go to the court?
Yeah.
These kind of very, I would say, maturest questions, but valid questions come up in mind of first home buyers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Investors, they're used to it, right? They have done it a few times, so they know. But for our first home buyer audience, can you please explain to me what is a conveyancer? How is it different from a solicitor or a lawyer?
Yeah, for sure. So conveyancers are licensed to be able to take care of any of the legal work that's involved in buying and selling real estate. That is, in its most simplest term, what a conveyancer's role is. Solicitor, conversely, is qualified and educated to provide advice in multiple areas of law, not necessarily just conveyancing. So that's where the difference between a conveyancer and a solicitor differs. Conveyancer is solely focused on property law and the conveyancing work that's involved in completing that transaction for the client, whereas a solicitor will do conveyancing work, but they'll also look after other areas of law as well.
Understand. And where does a conveyancer sit in the whole buyer's journey?
Yeah, so typically conveyancers will get involved around the time that someone's contemplating making an offer on purchasing a property. So our first involvement is to review the draft contract. In New South Wales, it's a legal requirement that the vendor has a draft contract prepared prior to the property being marketed for sale. The contract's required to include a number of prescribed documents, how the title looks, whether there's any covenants or easements, where the sewer mains are located, a bit about the zoning of the property as well, and also what it is that the vendor is actually selling. So the types of inclusions, or if they're excluding something from the sale, that will be noted in the contract. That's typically where we get involved around that time, that a buyer will say, all right, I'm pretty confident that this is the property for me. Time to get the terms and all the documents reviewed. And we get involved at that point to provide that advice.
So that's one very interesting thing you said about it's during. So when a vendor is marketing a property, they should have a draft contract ready.
Yes.
And if I'm going to buy a property, can I ask the developer or the person who is selling the property, hey, listen, before I pay you a single cent, can I please have a look at the contract? Or do I have to pay first to have a look at the contract, pay some amount to have a look at the contract?
That's a pretty interesting question. It depends on how the project's structured. It's not uncommon to pay like an expressions of interest amount, which would then trigger the developer to, or at least their panel firm to prepare a contract for the benefit of the purchaser. Quite often, I should also add that until contracts have been entered into, any deposit that a purchaser pays is entirely refundable. What will normally happen is that there will be a master contract that's prepared, and then we would often get involved to review that for the buyer. They may say, look, we don't know which particular unit it is that we're going to, put a deposit on yet, but here's the master contract, and we would give more or less like a top line summary of what's going on. And then once they put, a deposit down to actually secure the property that it is that they're wanting to purchase, we would then finalise a more detailed advice on, things like the schedule of inclusions, proposed lot sizes, areas, what's included in the space of the property as well. Yeah.
So basically, during buying the property, you first give the EOI, which can be a very minuscule amount to book, and then they will be able to share the generic contract, not specific to the apartment or the block that they want to buy. And then you provide a generic assessment of that, and then they go for the exchange, and then you get the real contract, and then you sort of negotiate and move towards the next stage.
Yeah.
And that's
there can be a couple of other methods as well. Look, it really just sort of depends on the structure of how the sale campaign is running, or what's being proposed by the developer or the selling agent. We will sometimes find that developments that have quite a lot of interest in the property. I'm thinking of some of the developments like around Barangaroo, for example, where there were literally people lining up to sign on the expressions of interest day. They would pay a deposit on that day and sign a contract, but it would come with a cooling off period.
Right.
So there's still time for the buyer to get things assessed in the background, get advice on the terms. They would be given the opportunity to pull out, but they would lose a deposit at that point.
After the cooling off period?
They would forfeit 1/4% of the purchase price if they pull out during the cooling off period.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. And you did say, you did mention in our previous conversation some sort of due diligence and somewhere around a 66W certificate.
Yes.
Do you want to dwell on that a little bit?
Yeah, so 66W certificate's unique to New South Wales. It's a document that waives any cooling off period in the contract. So as a license...
What's a cooling off period?
Oh, well, yes. We'll take one step back before we... So in New South Wales, there's a built-in cooling off period for the benefit of the purchaser outside of an auction. So if you're purchasing a property outside of an auction, if you sign a contract, it will come with a cooling off period for the benefit of the purchaser. You pay 1/4% of the purchase price, and then you have 5 business days to finalise all your due diligence, building pest strata reports, advice on the contract, finance, all those sorts of important things to tick off. And then at the end of the cooling off period, you pay the balance of the deposit and commit to purchasing the property. If you decide that for whatever reason, you don't have to give a reason, it can be that you changed your mind. If you decide to rescind the contract during the cooling off period, then you only forfeit that 1/4%.
Your EOI payment.
It's essentially the price that the purchaser pays for the benefit of getting the property off the market. So the vendor can't entertain any other offers during that period of time.
Yeah, and that's only fair to vendor to make sure that, Yeah. And what's sorry, now we come to the 66W certificate.
Yeah, so that waives the cooling off period. So if you are heading into negotiations as a buyer with a real estate agent, you've made an offer, someone else has made an offer around the same price. Sometimes you might find yourself in a bit of a rush or a race to exchange. And the agent will use that as a tool to speed up the due diligence for buyers, or at least for them to be comfortable with just committing to buying the property. And they'll say something along the lines of, the vendor's happy with your offer, but you need to sign a contract with a 66W certificate. So ultimately what that is meaning for the buyer is that they will need to commit to purchasing the property at the time that they sign the contract. So they pay the full deposit at that point in time. They're committing to purchasing the property. If they decide to pull out for whatever reason, they will lose the full deposit. And there are other remedies as well that the vendor can enforce. So it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. So it benefits the vendor, but not the end consumer.
Definitely, yes.
So if you see a 66W, probably try and negotiate not signing a 66W.
Yeah, you can try to, but of course, how real estate agents work, there's quite often some manipulation at play in terms of the way that they want to work. They're obviously employed by the vendor, so their interests are aligned with the vendor to try and obviously get the best possible price that they can on the best terms. And if they can get a buyer to commit to purchasing the property without a cooling off period, then that's an extra tick for them and the vendor as well.
Yeah, because it guarantees them the money.
Exactly.
Right. I get it. Look, the way I think is, I don't see something terribly wrong with that, because in the end, in this market, the developers also have to make sure that, they're taking the opportunity off the market.
Yeah.
They want to get the finance, because if they don't get the finance, project doesn't go ahead.
Yes.
But I do get, empathized with the end customers as well, because if they're gone and then they somehow think that, this is not working, they can take the money back. So think before you put in your deposit, think very carefully.
That's right. And, specifically for off-the-plan developments, there's a limited amount of due diligence that you can actually do anyway. Typically if a buyer were to go off to purchase a second-hand property, they would look at things like the strata records or, the building report, for example. That doesn't exist when you're buying something off the plan. So really it's just about being comfortable with the project itself, what's being included, and of course, what the terms of the contract are. That can be a relatively quick process. So it may not necessarily mean that a buyer is waiting on anything in particular before actually deciding that they want to commit to buying the property.
Apart from 66W, which is, I think, very critical, and thank you so much for touching that, what are other key points that a buyer and customer should keep in mind before buying a property? Or let's say, for example, before buying an off-the-plan property.
Yeah, so one of the big things with off-the-plan, as we all know, is that there's an extended period of time before the buyer will end up putting down, the final amount to purchase the property.
Yeah.
A lot can happen in that period of time.
Right.
Sometimes we're talking about 3 years. So it's important that the buyer keeps that in mind. For example, something on the horizon that's going to change their income situation, if they're planning on, going overseas for a period of time and earning, overseas income as well. That can have a flow-on effect to how their finances will be viewed by banks in Australia at the time that they need to pay the balance of the purchase price.
Yep.
So that is definitely a big consideration. It is a bit of a crystal ball. You don't really know, of course, what the future holds for anyone. But there is that element that the individual needs to be reasonably comfortable with, and knowing that it is a commitment. Just by signing the contract now, doesn't mean that in 2 years' time, when the property is 3/4 of the way being built and almost ready for completion, that you can change your mind. You've committed to buying the property. So there has to be something significantly wrong with the development or what the final product is for a buyer to have any remedy in terms of being able to potentially pull out or negotiate, something different. So,
Awesome, and I think that's a great point you touched on there. Like, you need to have that level of commitment because I think if you change your mind as well, and if you're under a bit of a risky situation, it will put you under risk, but it'll also put the developer under risk as well, right? I think the more and more you're opening this, I don't know why, but so I'm sort of getting some sympathy for the developer as well. Yeah. Well, guys, I mean, they do take a lot of risk, and then they end up in hot waters.
Yes. Yeah.
What is a cooling off period?
Yeah. So the cooling off.
No, sorry, I did ask you that already. Sorry.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
What is sunset clause?
Oh, yes.
That's what I wanted to ask you.
The sunset.
Clause.
Yeah.
Yes.
So all contracts that are subject to a property being built or the plans being registered, for example, they'll have a sunset date or period. It's essentially the last date that the vendor or in the case that we're talking about now, the developers have to register all the final documents in preparation for a settlement taking place. So that's typically what the sunset period or date refers to.
So if say for example, I buy a house and land package.
Yep.
And if the sunset date is 25th of December 2025.
Yes.
And by that time, if my house is not ready, what will happen?
Yeah, so in that scenario, really the ball is in the purchaser's court. If it's a fixed sunset date, quite often we see in contracts that there is the ability for the developer to extend the sunset date as well. That might be for reasons that are outside their control, weather events or delays in planning approvals.
Council. Yep.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head. So they can use that as a trigger to extend the sunset date if it's in the contract. Most contracts do have the ability for the vendor or developer to extend the sunset period, but it's usually quantified by particular days or reasons that is stipulated in the contract for them to do that. So it is kind of, kicking the can down the road in some respects. And from the purchaser's perspective, you might view the later date as being the sunset date rather than the earlier one. So even though you have your sunset date that's in the contract, probably can be extended. It may be able to be extended for up to 6 months. You would say that 6 month, the end of that 6 month period would be the official sunset date to work towards. But if we get to that point, sunset date hasn't been met, all the extensions have been expired, the purchaser then has the ability to rescind the contract and get their deposit back.
Do you have any examples where you have seen that happening?
No. We've had scenarios where developers haven't been able to get the appropriate finance to get the property completed. They've given the option to the purchasers to pay a little bit more money to get the project actually completed. And that's been a scenario that we've dealt with a little bit over the last, not so much now, but it was quite sort of evident, particularly during COVID with the lack of building materials and increase of labour costs and those sorts of things as well now. Things have sort of settled down in that department. But we saw a few developments where purchasers were being asked to contribute more than what they'd originally contemplated, more than what they signed a contract for the ability for them to be able to commit to actually getting the project complete. And we had a couple of buyers that said no. So they rescinded at that point. Back. Yeah, so they get their deposit back at that point. Yeah.
And at that time, and okay, this question just came into my mind. And at that point, if you get your deposit back, what happens with your stamp duty?
Well, if the transaction doesn't complete and you've already paid stamp duty, you get that back.
Right.
Yeah, so that would be refundable.
And New South Wales government is pretty good with that, giving back the stamp duty, or?
Oh, it's the process, as all those sorts of things are. Exemptions, concessions, refunds. You go through the process, but eventually, yes, it does end up getting paid out. So.
Man, all these things, Dave. All these things handled by you, like by a conveyancer.
Yeah. So this is
work. I think you guys. I shouldn't say that. That's controversial. I was about to say something. I think out of all the stakeholders, you do a lot of complicated work.
That's very kind of you to say. Yeah.
I mean, because you would be invited, like in the world of marketing, right? The most complicated thing in marketing would be not complicated, but the most difficult thing in marketing would be to change someone's view of a brand or a person from negative to positive. That's when we get the sort of a disaster management PR.
Yes.
And they do that. I find conveyancers something like that. When things go ugly, then they are your last bet. They look at the contracts. What are your rights? What you can do? What you can't do? That's a tough.
There's definitely a lot of that goes into it, and a lot that our clients deliberately don't see. We don't involve them in quite a lot of the background day-to-day work that we're doing in the transaction because it's not really relevant to them. And even though we're talking about quite some very complex matters that come up from time to time, we obviously involve the client in those discussions to keep things as simple as we possibly can. Try not to bombard the client so much with all of the ins and outs of the legalities of what's happening day to day, and just keep them involved in the stuff that's important to them.
So, and for a specific contract or a specific property settlement, what are your fees? What's the usual fees range?
Yeah, so that definitely, it varies between, there's no industry standard. So if you Googled cheap online conveyancing, you would find someone that would advertise, $800 plus GST and disbursements or, something like that. If you went to a top tier law firm in town, they would probably give you a cost estimate of somewhere around $8,000.
Oh, wow.
So the range in fees varies quite considerably.
What do they do in $8,000?
Well, that's a very good question. Yeah.
Will they bring down the price of the property, or?
Oh God, no. And there's some questions around whether that's actually valuable or not. Going to a top tier law firm for a relatively basic standard transaction, like for a conveyancing matter, for example, may not necessarily be in a buyer's best interest. If you're working with a dedicated conveyancer where they're only working with people that are buying and selling real estate, and that's what they do day in, day out. Particularly for us, we're able to refine the processes quite seamlessly so that, we're not at that $8,000 mark by any means. We're not charging by the hour. We've figured out that, a fixed fee amount is going to be sufficient, that gives value for money for the client, and also, obviously represents, the value that we're adding towards the transaction as well. So from the beginning, for buyers, you'll see some solicitors and conveyancers charge a fee to review the contract. That can vary from $200 to $500, for example. We don't charge a fee for that. So we review the contracts up front for our buyers free of charge. They don't pay us a cent until they're committed to purchasing the property.
Right.
And then the fee structure at our end works out to be about $1,800 plus GST and the usual sort of searches that go into completing the transaction.
Right. So bear in mind for the first home buyers that cost of buying a property does include conveyancing fees. So you make sure you have saved money for that as well. Speaking of first home buyers, when you deal with first home buyers as compared to investors who have done it a few times, do you see a difference between how you have to deal with them?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, it's particularly for first home buyers, obviously it's their first time contemplating a transaction this size. So naturally, they're going to be a little bit more cautious in the way that they approach, dealing with us or real estate agents or other stakeholders involved in the transaction. They'll typically have what we would say probably more elementary questions, but it's not. Like they're very valid questions around sort of how, what is a conveyancer? We quite often have clients that will approach us, first home buyers in particular, that will say, hey, my broker told me I need to call you. I'm about to sign a contract and they told me that I need to get it reviewed. A lot of people don't know that that's actually a thing. That it's important that contracts are reviewed by conveyancers, and so the dialogue is quite different compared to a seasoned investor who's done multiple property transactions over their lifetime, as opposed to someone who's doing it for the first time.
Like you do it, I don't want to know.
Yeah, well, more often than not, we do find that there's a element of our clients that are repeat clients that come back to us quite regularly. Some of our clients have used us a dozen times, and the dialogue is pretty well like that. Call me when you need me. Otherwise, over to you. Send me an email if you need me to sign anything. That's kind of it. But conversely, for the typical sort of first home buyers, they will need just a little bit more hand holding, a bit more reassurance that everything is going on to plan, on track. So we try to be as proactive as we can with that. Copy them in on emails on things that we're doing that we may not otherwise do for investors. They don't care about that other stuff. But some of our first home buyers, it's just nice for them to be able to see that things are moving and progressing and going in the right direction.
You said something about, your clients keep coming back to you, right? And I've spoken to a few other conveyancers. So in the property market, in my experience, there are two professions who have a good customer lifetime value, which means they get repeat customers.
Yeah.
Conveyancers and tax accountants.
Yeah, accountants definitely.
And the reason I think, and this is my own theory, and feel free to bash me in the comment section, is that the barrier to entry in these two professions is quite high, right? You got to be educated, you got to go and have a university degree, and then it's not easy to become a tax accountant, and it's highly, I would say, intellectual and labor-intensive job.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't want to change your doctors again and again.
Yeah.
You don't want to change your lawyers. You don't want to change your conveyancers again and again. You don't want to change your tax accountant again and again.
Yeah.
Having said that, I have had personal experiences with I would say one or two conveyancers that just don't give a rat's to pick up the phone, answer, because sometimes if the vendor solicitor is trying to contact them, they just don't respond.
Yeah.
Right? Have you seen in the business where there is greed to get more and more customers in, because it just takes like, I don't know, a day to just read a contract and then it's all usual stuff. But when it comes to doing actual work, they don't have bandwidth because they have taken so much in.
Yeah.
As compared to you, where you are actually getting repeat customers, you're definitely doing something, right?
Yeah, particularly with our model, we've grown in our staffing pool as a result of that. The thing that we're always very conscious about is our client experience, and if there's opportunities to make that better, and that involves bringing on more staff, more conveyancers, or more admin to help us out. then we'll do that. We find that quite a lot of other businesses, they're reluctant to invest in that. As a business owner, I can relate to that, where they see an expense of bringing on more staff, then the pressure for them to bring in more work. It can be quite sort of challenging in that respect. But really, that's what it's all about for us, the overall client experience. And if our clients can walk away knowing that we are there for them in the future, that we are their trusted advisor the next time that they go to do another transaction, then that's, the best outcome for us. We will quite often have clients, without blowing my horn too much, that have been referred to us through several sources. So they'll say something like, "Oh, my sister used you recently, and my real estate agent recommended you as well. So I'm happy going with you." Things like that, and that's a bit of a pat on the back for us, but it also, means that we keep holding ourselves to an incredibly high standard. So those sorts of conversations that are happening with our previous clients to potential new clients outside of our office are still incredibly positive. Yeah.
I think what you were saying is, it reminds me of my conversation with Andrew Dean, who is an excellent mortgage broker, such a pleasant personality. He was here, and he's from Flint Group. He was telling the same thing. I had the same question for him.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'll paraphrase what he said. He said something about investing in customers, right? Because what these, I'm going to be very careful in how I describe this, but what these small business conveyancers trying to do is treat customers as more transactional.
Yeah.
Right? I get my $1,200 from you. Done. I don't want to see you again. We've done it. That's it. Whereas folks like you, folks like Andrew, they shake hands. They go like, what is your goal? Let's make a longer business relationship. And then Andrew was like, I personally give them a call once a fortnight, and then I will through the Flint Group, I'll send them emails with what's happening, what are the updates, etc., and what's happening in the overall market, so they know they're dealing with someone trustworthy. And I think what you were saying is that you are investing in staff and you're investing in admin staff who can look at these laborious tasks, so you can concentrate on improving your customer relationship, whilst the other folks, that's not their priority. Their priority is very transactional because they want to earn quick money, and get some revenue coming up. But that's not how you scale. That's not how you go big. That's not how you create a market. Would you agree to my description?
Yeah, totally agree. Something that you mentioned, that Andrew does quite well is like getting to know his clients and what their goals are. It's hugely important for us too. There's a massive opportunity for conveyancers to provide value in not just, getting the transaction completed. If we know that our clients are selling something else, or, if they've got deadlines to move in, or whatever the situation may be for our client, we can tailor our services to best suit what the outcome is that they're trying to achieve. It's not just simply about getting the transaction completed on a particular day. Of course, that's first and foremost the most important part. But if we know things that are going on in the background for our clients, we can make it better for them. We might, for example, have a conversation with our client and just be talking about various things, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're going on a holiday, a 3-week holiday tomorrow, or hopefully not tomorrow, but they might say next week or something like that." And we'll say, "Oh, okay. Have you signed your loan documents yet?" So so we're able to have those conversations because we're getting to know our clients more, and then we're talking to them about things like, "Okay, well, what's your availability going to be like?" We have a lot of clients that are professionals that can't answer their phone during periods of time, or shift workers as well. Getting to know your clients up front and building that relationship just enables you to provide a more tailored experience for them in the long run. So that, it's a hugely important aspect for us as well.
So one lesson for my audience here is, you're finding a a conveyancer or solicitor, and you're finding, oh, it's like 500, 800 bucks, cheap cost. Don't do that, right? Don't do that. It you got to invest in a good conveyancer because you want to make sure that the service that you're getting, hopefully by the grace of God, this won't be your first property.
Yeah.
This will be just not your first property. It'll be multiple properties that you'll be buying, and pick someone who is not treating you as a transaction but as an investment.
Yeah.
Right?
Spot on.
Who's actually spending time to educate you, so you come back to them and they give you more education, more better service. Because this is a personal experience, right? So I don't know if this is the right thing or not, but my first conveyancer, he is like, he wanted me to sign something. I say, oh yeah, sure, send me the DocuSign. Oh, I don't have a DocuSign. What do you mean you don't have a DocuSign?
No. Yeah.
And he goes like, no, I can send you via fax or post.
Wow.
I'm like, where I'm sitting, I can't do that. He goes like, where are you sitting? I say, I'm sitting in 2020.
Yeah.
Right?
I threw my fax machine out 20 years ago. Yeah.
So you need to come up with, and that guy screwed up my settlement big time in such a way that I owed money to ATO.
Oh, wow.
After my settlement, I owed GST to ATO.
You're kidding.
And the ATO was like, hey, listen, first thing, who was your conveyancer?
Yeah.
Who does that, right? So big fiasco. Personal learning, make sure you spend money. Don't be a cheap ass when it comes to conveyancing, mortgage broking, tax accountant. Get the quality, and it'll pay you.
Yeah.
Which comes to my last question of this podcast. Is if you have to give 3 to 4 attributes on how to choose a good conveyancer. What are the good attributes of a good conveyancer? What would you say? So people listening to this podcast can then apply those, tick boxes while choosing a conveyancer.
Yeah. One of the biggest bits of feedback that we get around what it is that we do that's somewhat sort of different or a value add for our clients is availability. So traditional law firms and conveyancers will turn their phone off at 5 and turn it back on again at 9 and shut the emails down, and that's it till the next morning, or even over the weekend. They won't be available to help their clients during that period of time. But as we know, a lot of property transactions take place outside of traditional business hours. So availability is a big thing. And you may not know, as a buyer going into negotiations with a real estate agent, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you may all of a sudden get a phone call from the agent saying, okay, your offer's accepted, come in and sign a contract. Well, hang on, what? All right, well, I better do that. And you go in to sign the contract and you call your conveyancer to say, hey, can you send over the documentation? And there's no answer.
Wow.
And so there's just this period of time where inaction and, people sleep on the decisions that they've made, and all of a sudden, the property might be sold to someone else, or the vendors change their mind and then miss the property. That's a massive, massive thing. So availability is definitely huge. It's number one, I think, in our sort of industry. The value for money is a big thing as well. What you touched on before about sort of the pricing, don't be a cheapskate. It's definitely an aspect, the old adage of you get what you pay for. I believe that to a degree. I think that there is an argument to say, well, yeah, you can overpay for things for sure. But generally, if someone is charging, around that sort of $800, $1,000 mark, they're saying no to a lot of things. So they are probably not available on the phone when you need them, or they may only respond to emails, several hours after you've requested them, because their focus is on the volume of transactions. If you're doing a transaction for $800 a transaction, you've got to probably be doing, if you're a one-man band, you've got to be doing at least 5 of those a day, really, to be making any money. And 5 transactions a day takes up a lot of time. So, you've got to keep that in mind. Like, yeah, okay, the price looks good, but let's have a look at, how long they've been around for. Are they reputable? If they've been around for, less than a year and they're charging $800, I could probably safely say that they're not going to be around next year. They've realised they haven't made any money, and if things go wrong, God forbid, touch wood, and you need to contact your conveyancer again, say a year down the track to get some help with, an issue that's emerged, and they've disappeared, well, bad luck. So, longevity is a big thing as well, reputation. They're, massive components to building that sort of relationship, I suppose, with your conveyancer.
Pay for the reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
David, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me.